Hi there, yep, that's right, it's Nick Dutch back on the camera again one more time. Yep, how the heck's it going? Right, just want to talk to you about this a little more. Of course, you can see it's my it's the Ouija board, which I tend to use for doing the various seances that I do on YouTube, which you may have seen some of, you may not have done, never mind. I just want to basically tell you a bit more about what I think about this particular device and how it can be used, how it can't be used, and just anything else which sort of springs to my mind whilst I'm doing this video. It's another one of my numerous sort of like unrehearsed, unscripted videos where I'm just sitting here telling you basically what I think with just a few vague ideas to what I want to discuss with you, but not necessarily with any like rehearsal, any script or anything else like that. Obviously, if I hold it up to you just like that, you can just simply see it's nothing. Okay, this is simply nothing. It's a piece of cardboard, and there's people out there who are terrified of these things, absolutely terrified. If someone shows me something like, my cigarette lighter saying, "Oh, we got to be afraid of this," I would laugh at them, just as I would laugh at anybody who says that this thing here, which is just a piece of, a thickish piece of cardboard with a bit of like lamination on the outside. Is that the right word? Well, anyway, it's plastic coated, so essentially your planchette, you think, can slide over it with reasonable ease. Should it even remotely be terrifying? The fact of the matter is, it should not be. Alright, the things which has made the Ouija board terrifying is a combination between folk superstition, which has, developed since the first Ouija boards came onto the market. Of course, the word Ouija is essentially just a trade name. Okay, it doesn't really have any special occult significance in its own right. It's a trade name for the first ever Ouija board, and because it's gone into common parlance, Ouija, spelled O-U-I-J-A, has become like the name that people ascribe to these types of things. Alright, I think the more proper term for it is a talking board, but don't worry about that. Okay, it's just a board with some numbers and letters printed on it. That's all you really need to know. The issue comes with people's preconceptions as to what the device can do and cannot do. I mean, there's even one an individual who I'd say is very good at doing the presentation style for being a spiritualist, who said in one of his videos that there's bad spirits in the Ouija or something like that, which I think is pathetic. I think that's intellectually flawed anyway, at best. All it is just a piece of cardboard with some numbers and letters printed on it. So just try and take all the superstition and fear that you've got about this thing and throw it out the window. I mean, even some religious groups try and big up the story about the Ouija board for their own gain. Okay, there are some people saying, "Oh, this thing is evil," because obviously they want to make sure that you only follow their interpretation of whatever their religion is and don't do anything else. Right, now I'm going to tell you where the danger really is, because it's not totally innocuous, and the reason it's not totally innocuous is because of the way that people think. Alright, because that's the thing that makes it dangerous. Yes, I do believe in free thought, so to speak. I think that people should have the ability to be able to decide for themselves on the basis of their own reasoning ability. But as far as if your free thought has been driven by superstitious fear and dread, that's a bad thing. If the conclusions you come to about the apparent results of a Ouija board seance are basically as a result of the superstitions and all the rest of that that's been thrown your way, then that's not really a good thing, and it seriously isn't going to help you in any way whatsoever. As far as can you rely 100% on any form of message which comes from the Ouija board, the answer would have to be no. And that would have to be a very big and very emphatic no. Why use it? It's curious. Alright, it's curious, and strange things seem to happen under some strange circumstances. If you listen to some people, they would seem to suggest that the planchette, which is just a bit of technological jargon for whatever it is you rest your fingers on, which could be like this, a piece of plasterboard with a hole in the middle of it. Alright, one of the least high-tech things on the face of the planet, okay, would move around all by itself, spelling things out. Then, of course, you've got what some people regard as being the skeptical interpretation, which is the ideomotor effects, which I've mentioned before, and is very important because I actually ascribe a lot of value and importance to the ideomotor effects, which is when something in the mind makes your fingers want to move in, make little movements, which will slowly move the planchette around. But it is because of your fingers. And so, yeah, I mean, you are going to see, the fingers pushing against the planchette. That doesn't mean to say that the person doing the seance is deliberately pushing it around. Oh, I must spell out a message now. Ooh. No. What that means is it's the ideomotor effect which is doing it. Now, there is another way of doing it, which I've alluded to before in previous videos, and I want to mention that again, which is when, yes, you do deliberately push the planchette around. Now, under what circumstances would that be useful? Well, it's when you get a feeling or an instinct that the planchette wants to or should go in a certain direction, but you don't necessarily know what letter it's going to land up on. Okay, so it's a difference in the way in which you're thinking about using the Ouija board. You're not thinking, oh, I've got to spell out the word hello, so it's got to go to the H, then the E, then all the rest of that. No, it's more a question of, I don't know where this thing wants to go, but it seems to want to move sort of like in a sort of like front and left direction, so I will move it in that direction, or whatever. Okay, and so that's more to do with the individual just thinking, oh, there's some feeling I'm getting which suggests it wants to go in that direction. Now, I've had experiences like that before, in which I started being really skeptical of myself during the actual experience, because I didn't feel I was doing it genuinely, because there was me in my meditative, tranquil state, feeling slightly hyper aware, which is what you do once in a while when you're trying to do a Ouija board seance, and there's me pushing it. So I'm feeling very skeptical whilst I'm doing it. And then, hey presto, a few letters come out which I didn't think would come out. And after that, we start to get something which seems to resemble a message, which was contrary to any of my previous preconceptions as to what would actually come out from the board itself. So it is curious. Now, what I think is most interesting is to use the practice with the Ouija board to experiment with the states of mind that you've got and the various attitudes and values that you've got about various different things. Okay, you can also use it to explore, I would say, different forms of attention when you're doing something of a meditative nature. Essentially, it is like a form of meditation tool in its own right, but it's different to other forms of tools, okay? Because when you're doing it, you may be in a meditative state, you may even have an impression in your mind of an apparent spirit, because you don't know whether ghosts exist, you don't know whether there's demons or angels or spirits or anything at all. All you have is just possibly an impression of there being a character with you. Alright, that's as far as it can get, an impression of a character that's with you. And it can have varying levels of apparent accuracy, or is accuracy the right word? Or apparent clarity, or its presence is more felt in some cases than other cases, and you may get other things popping into your mind, little visualizations here and there, or in your meditation that particular character which starts to feel like its presence may appear to be in your mind's eye surrounded by a setting, just like the Strawberry Lady one, which I did a little while ago that you might remember, okay, in which there was a feeling of a setting. So it's an interesting contemplative meditation type experience. And yes, it is done to apparently communicate with things which have some kind of connection to a person who may have passed on, or some kind of apparent connection to an idea or a concept. I mean, some people have suggested to me, have you tried invoking the spirit or the egregor or whatever it is of a country? To which I would say, I don't really see the point or the merits of doing that anyway. And of course, you always got your preconceptions about nations anyway. So the only thing that could possibly happen is that I might get more clarity as to my values or views about a particular concept, or alternatively, if there is a consciousness out there, then something unexpected might happen. But even if something unexpected does happen, we still can't say what it means. All right. It's always the superstition or the superstitious interpretation which makes people want to say, all right, that has happened, it's had special personal meaning to myself, therefore that, that is true, that must be the spirit. But we don't know that. What kind of like intellectual gymnastics have you been through to suggest that the movements which come from your fingers and move the planchette around is directly connected to the objective existence of a spiritual entity? The fact of the matter is that there is no way of proving it. Now, you might then think, well, what happens if there's, you ask the apparent spirit a question and an answer comes out which you then get corroborated by researching into the character or researching more into the history of that particular place or location? Well, all you got then is a strange experience that's rather freaky. Alright? Now, there's all kinds of hypothetical possibilities associated with this. Is a little part of you doing some remote viewing? Are you doing a partial out-of-body experience? Is there a real spirit of the place or person? Is there some other consciousness which is part of the whole equation? Or is that knowledge already somewhere inside you because of something you've seen on television or on the internet or anywhere? And it's therefore coming out in the Ouija board? Or alternatively, is it purely coincidence? Well, obviously it is coincidence, because coincidence just means two things happening at the same time, two sort of meaningful things happening together. It doesn't necessarily suggest that there is a relation between the two, when there might be or there might not be. Like me turning my kettle on and the kettle actually boiling the water, that's a coincidence, because the two things are happening. The kettle's turned on, the water is boiling. There is a connection because we know how the kettle works. Okay? But if, like, let's say, I don't know, you go to one of these ghastly New Age shops, which we all love, okay? We all know they're ghastly, but we all love them anyway. And the guy behind the counter says, this stone, if you buy this stone, you will meet a lover. And then, hey presto, you go to a nightclub the following Saturday night, and you find someone, and basically, you have a bit of fun. Was it anything to do with you owning the stone, or were those two things coincidences but were unrelated? There's no correlation or no direct causation between owning the stone and having a bit of fun in the nightclub on that Saturday night. Alright, so we do have to be rational and have some skepticism, but the device itself is essentially fun to play with. As I say, it depends upon the type of experience that you're getting and you're sort of like, for want of a better phrase, working with. And sometimes it does seem to dredge something out of out of your mind. Sometimes it does seem to be operating in a different way. I mean, it's so difficult to describe the sensations that you get when you're a bit practiced and you've been doing Ouija board seances for a while. But I would just say, play around with it. If you are the kind of individual who's curious about yourself and curious about your own mentality and what is inside you subconsciously, then by all means use it for subconscious investigation. But also, I would also be skeptical about the apparent results of the Ouija board seance, because essentially skepticism is essentially very, very good. Okay, even if you get something that comes out of the Ouija board seance itself which is scary or seemingly inappropriate or maybe a bit rude, then it might not actually be related to what's happening properly in your mind at all. It could just be coincidence, namely two things happening, but there's no actual causal connection between the two of them. Essentially, the Ouija board is something which is just great fun and basically should be played with, because it raises more questions. And the whole thing about my whole perspective about occultism and all the rest of that is that these strange experiences do happen, but they raise more questions than providing answers. And there's too many people out there looking for very simplistic answers, and they're not prepared to admit the fact that the experiences provide more questions, but they don't provide the answers. And that's something that you've got to remember. Play with a Ouija board, practice with it, it's great. And it's incredibly, incredibly curious. But don't rely upon it.